Well, hello and welcome to the Cyber Safety News Show here on the Safety News Network. My name is Adam Blue, and each week I'll dive into the news of cybersecurity to keep you updated on what attacks are occurring, how you could best protect yourself, and just to get overall knowledge on the world of cybersecurity as it continues to evolve. So this week we're actually going to talk about a way attackers have pretty much gained access to keys of the kingdom. We'll talk about that here in a second. Also, what about genetic information? Could a cyber attack get genetic information, and can that be used for some purpose? We'll get into that. And then also we're going to talk about North Korea. We don't hear about them too often, but North Korea seems to have some very sophisticated cyber attacks and exploits that they're able to use around the globe. We'll talk about that as well. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started here. First of all, this one's pretty big. This is from, let's see, Krebs on security.com. I haven't really used this source before, but hackers stole access tokens from Okta support unit. So when I was talking about getting keys to the kingdom, this is it. So Okta, you might not have heard of it. You might have heard of it. If you're in the cybersecurity industry, you've probably heard of Okta. It's no different than something like Ping or Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator. I mean, it's a layer to it. Basically, the idea is trusting, verifying user access before they can get in. A lot of times, if you're using a program like Okta, you can program it in such a way where that you can require a user to authenticate through that software service to be verified and then get the access they need. So, here's what's scary. If hackers can somehow get those certificates, those tokens, those trusts, and then they can use that to then gain access through whoever user they want to. And that is kind of a scary thing here. So in an advisory sent to an undisclosed number of customers on October 19th, Okta said it has identified adversarial activity that leveraged access to a stolen credential to access Okta's support case management system. The threat actor was able to view files uploaded by certain Okta customers as part of recent support cases. So this is, if we kind of look at the path here of entry, the attacker is using kind of a phishing method through support in order to get access to specific files. It's the hoops that you have to jump through to get to where you want in the end. So they're using cybersecurity threat techniques in order to get the access they need. So Okta was on top of this. They even had a blog post going out where they talked about that they have notified anyone that could have been involved with this breach, this attack. And they've done the things on their end that they can to mitigate that. And now I always want to remind people, just because a company and a service as big as Okta got breached doesn't mean it is something wrong or they have poor security controls, because there's really nothing you can do when threat actors are evolving their techniques and even utilizing the person-to-person attack, where instead of using a computer system to hack in, you are speaking to a person and tricking them. It's a sad case, but being something as big as Okta, it's a big deal. It's just like if there was a home, like your house, a home key manufacturer, that every key they've ever made to a house, they have the blueprint to that in a storage location. And let's say someone just happened to trick a support person to get them that storage, and now all of a sudden they have the blueprints to every single key in a neighborhood. That's kind of a weird analogy, but it makes sense. And we're going to move on now. This next one. This has to do with 23andMe. I was talking about genetic information, genetic data at the beginning here. And just looking at this title, 23andMe user data stolen in targeted attack on Ashkenazi Jews. At least 1 million data points from 23andMe accounts appear to have been exposed on breach forums. While the scale of the campaign is unknown, 23andMe says it's working to verify the data. So the genetic testing company 23andMe confirmed on Friday that data from a subset of its users has been compromised. The company said its systems were not breached and that attackers and that attackers gather the data by guessing the login credentials of a group of users and then scraping more people's information from a feature known as DNA relatives. Users opt into sharing their information through DNA relatives for others to see. This reminds me of some of the previous videos I've done where we talked about companies that then work with third-party companies to get certain things done. But if hackers can get in through that third party, that could be the doorway to get to the main company. This is a little similar. So if you're not familiar with like 23andMe and the DNA companies, you know, you get something in the mail where then you swab, get some saliva on something, send it back in. They're able to extract DNA, get data points from that they can upload into their database. Now, with your access to the website, you're able to see that information as well as the ability to link yourself to other relatives that through the service you might find are related to you, or it could just be family members in general. But by using that feature where you are sharing information to others, you're potentially exposing your information that way. Because what happened here was hackers didn't necessarily hack or brute force their way in. They just happened to find username and passwords. Now, this could be simply from another hack that occurred somewhere else. Those username and passwords were uploaded to the dark web. Someone got a hold of them and decided, well, we'll just try them on a bunch of websites. We'll try on 23andMe, and then poof, they got in. Now, once they're in, they'll look at an account and see, okay, is this something that could be useful? In this case, it was. They were able to directly get to relatives that were linked to them to get even more data. So all that data was then scraped, was then put online on the dark web for others to see. Right now, 23andMe has access to that data. They're going through it to see if they can validate that data and potentially reach out to those who are affected by it. I mean, that's usually the next step. And so I gotta say, so far, between these two big companies, Okta and 23andMe, I think they are doing the best they can when it comes to these ways hackers are getting in. In both of these scenarios, it wasn't necessarily like logging into a computer, getting into the code and hacking in. This was using other means just to get their foot in the door. And once they got in, they were able to go much further. It's very interesting. I mean, just think of everything that could be done with genetic data. I mean, to be honest, I don't think there's anything in my line of work where that comes up. That could be a future thing, or that could be in more specific industries that have to deal with genetics or DNA. Or, I mean, I can only think you get certain information from certain people. What could you use that for? Could that be for some futuristic, like cloning DNA campaign? Yeah, think about that. Being able to steal the genetic information of someone's DNA, potentially cloning them, growing. What if you were to grow from that DNA an eye or a thumbprint in a lab that then you can use as means to get through some security, biometric security features? That might seem far-fetched, but that doesn't seem so far off. Now, I want to go to another one that also seems a little far-fetched. You know, this was kind of news to me. So this has to do with North Korea. North Korean hackers are targeting software developers and impersonating IT workers. You know, North Korea is very interesting. We don't hear about them too much. It's almost sort of this isolated society, I guess, among our world where, you know, sometimes things happen where people are detained in North Korea. The idea is maybe the leaders aren't necessarily treating the population there great. You hear enough of North Korea, or at least I have, where you just somehow wouldn't think that they would have sophisticated cyber threat actors that are out there hacking and attacking. But let's look at this. Okay, so Microsoft has outlined on Wednesday how North Korea-backed hacking groups Lazarus, Diamond Sleet, and Andariel? Onyx Sleet, very interesting names, have been exploiting a critical authentication bypass vulnerability. And here real quick, we can see the CVE. Remember, when you see that CVE, that's the naming convention used to say, here's a vulnerability. And then it has the number because they denote, I guess, as a whole in the world, cybersecurity specialists denote kind of values to a known exploit. That way it could be referenced at all times. It could be researched, looked up. I'm sure there are cybersecurity experts out there who have memorized numbers of certain exploits that they have to work with often. But anyway, authentication bypass vulnerability in JetBrains TeamCity server to breach target systems and establish persistent access to compromised hosts to use them as a beachhead for more widespread compromise of companies' systems and networks. Diamond Sleet was observed using 2 attack paths. The first consisted in the deployment of Forest Tiger backdoor, while the second deployed payloads for DLL search order hijacking attacks. Moving on. Okay, so North Korea's state-sponsored hackers have been linked to a social engineering campaign. Again, this is very similar to just the last 2 articles I just read, because the idea here is not necessarily going in brute forcing, trying to get in somewhere, but using social engineering. And this is unique. Targeting software developers through GitHub. So GitHub, it's a repository for code for all various sorts of applications. There's collaboration that occurs there. The code is shared so others can use it, work on it, edit it. What a way to get into a system than to social engineer yourself to be a part of a code base that runs some very important systems. Let's see. By pretending to be a developer or a recruiter, the attacker managed to convince the victim to collaborate on a GitHub repository and ultimately download and execute malware on its device. Judging by their leverage of vulnerabilities in DevOps solutions such as TeamCity, it looks like their objectives and goals have remained constant. So let's look at this. North Korea IT workers, potential malicious insiders. North Korean IT workers are also taking advantage of the shortage of skilled employees and have been contacting recruiters from companies offering software development and other IT jobs. By hiring these individuals, companies may end up with their trade secrets or funds stolen and their venture sabotaged from the inside. That seems pretty scary. So using social engineering, and this is kind of an old tactic too, right? You want to get a job somewhere and you are sort of faking it till you make it the credentials in order to get the job you want, right? And that's almost in a way what North Korea has to do, or these IT workers, because are they disclosing where they live? Probably not. They could be using a IP anonymizer or spoofing an IP address to make it seem like they're coming from another location. They get the job they want, they get access to systems, and they can go in and do whatever they want. It's very interesting. It's very interesting that this is the way that not only North Korea goes about it, it's very sophisticated, but this seems to be the prevailing method to get access to data. So, that kind of brings me back here then to my final thoughts on these 3 instances here, because what we have is, one, we have a way using social engineering to get keys to the kingdom, to get access to anything you need, to get access to users' access, right? We have the other one, the 23andMe, which is, again, social engineering to get in, or I guess it's not necessarily the social engineering, but it's still not using the hacking as much as it is getting usernames and passwords to get in. And then that way, because of the social links that occur within the service, being able to get the data that way. And then we come across North Korea where, interesting, they don't seem like they would be that sophisticated in cybersecurity, but they use social engineering to work with developers, to pretend there's someone else so they can get close and get the code, or pretend that they are someone else in order to get a job with a company that gives them access to the necessary data they need. So that's 3 very interesting, high threatening situations where it wasn't as technologically advanced to get in as you would think a cybersecurity attack would be. Simply social engineering. And it makes me think, as we move forward in the future, do we need to be scared, worried about it? Do we need to be looking over our shoulder anytime maybe we are just going by our day-to-day, speaking with someone in our normal business, and they're like, hey, can you get me this? Hey, can you click on this link? Well, hey, why don't we collaborate on something? Are we going to start maybe second guessing that and being like, okay, I don't know this person too well, but if they are through this organization, they are vetted. So I guess I could trust him. Or do we need to kind of stop and be like, yeah, I don't know. Let me do some sort of verification. This is something we've talked about before as part of training employees within an organization, that you want to do secondary checks on a lot of processes. So you have another set of eyes on things to make sure as you go through the process, everything is secure, things aren't exposed. Because it seems like it can come out of anywhere. And really looking at these cases that occurred here, really everyone did everything they could to be secure, but there are just some security incidences that are, not that they're sophisticated, but they use the human element to get around tech systems in order to get the things they need. So, very interesting there. So, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think. Have you been involved with the breach? Have you been notified, like we saw up above with the previous articles? The Okta, 23andMe, were those that got their data stolen were contacted. Has that ever happened to you? Please let me know below, and maybe the company that contacted you. I'd like to collect some data on that. Nothing nefarious though. But also, any other interesting cybersecurity news you've come across or new threats that you haven't seen talked about much, leave them in the comment below. We'd like to take a look at that. But that does it for this week. Thanks for watching the Cyber Safety News Show here on the Safety News Network. I am Adam Blue. Please subscribe if you haven't. Like this video if you thought it was pretty cool. And we'll talk later.